Hey friends, welcome to TechHarvesting. In today's video, we are going to have a look at Typescript, which is a programming language and it's very popular. Actually, it's getting more popular these days. I'm covering a lot of topics that are getting really popular these days. So Typescript is super cool. It's a very awesome programming language. And today is a crash course of Typescript. Now, if you want to go to this crash course, you'll need to know at least a bit of JavaScript because this is mainly focused for JavaScript developers. But doesn't matter if you don't know JavaScript. Also, if you know some other programming language, it's gonna be fine. So make sure you subscribe before you get started. This video is a bit longer than my usual videos, and let's get started. So to get started, let's go through this quick slides, this quick presentation that I created. It's on what we're gonna cover in this video, and also a bit about TypeScript. So let's begin. What is TypeScript? TypeScript is a programming language. You might have already known that. If you have not, TypeScript is a programming language. It's known as a superset of JavaScript, which means it has all the features that JavaScript has. So every feature like variables, functions, arrays, everything, but it adds on to more features on top of JavaScript. The main features that it adds is called the type system, which we'll be covering soon in the entire course. That's the main thing about TypeScript, but that's what TypeScript is. It's just a superset of JavaScript. It was created by Microsoft, and you can use TypeScript instead of JavaScript in any project. The framework might support TypeScript. For example, if you're creating an Express application or if you're creating a React application. All these frameworks, libraries have the support for TypeScript. So you can use TypeScript instead of JavaScript in any of these projects. So the thing is that TypeScript compiles into JavaScript, which means like you have the TypeScript code, you're going to convert it into JavaScript with the TypeScript compiler installed on your system. It's very simple to install, and I'll also show you. One other thing is that the browser that you use will not understand TypeScript code. So if you link a TypeScript file and an HTML file, the types will make some errors and the browser won't be able to understand your script. So you'll need to convert the TypeScript files into JavaScript files. So that's the main thing that you'll have to do. You have to build your code. So overall, TypeScript is a very good choice, and yeah. So you can see in the small diagram, it converts TypeScript into JavaScript. So what we'll be having a look today. We'll look at all these things of TypeScript. So we'll have a look at the installation of the TypeScript compiler. We'll have a look at types, interfaces, enums, classes, tuples, union types, and a lot more stuff. You can look here. And so let's jump into VS Code and start writing some code, and also let's install the TypeScript compiler. So to install the TypeScript compiler, you'll need to have Node.js installed on your computer. It's very easy to install. If you're on Windows, just go to this website and download the installer. So the same thing if you're on Mac OS or Linux. And I have also a video where you can use the Node version manager to install all these, and I'll link it down below if you want to follow that guide. But you'll need to have Node.js installed if you want to run the TypeScript compiler. And so to install the compiler, all you need to do is to run npm install -g, and you need to write in Typescript. Okay, and I made a small typo there. There you go. Hit enter. And if you have Node.js, you'll have this npm command accessible. It's the Node package manager. So you can run that command, and it's gonna go ahead and install it. You can see it got installed. Now if I clear my screen and if I do tsc, which is TypeScript compiler, hit enter, you'll see that I get my TypeScript compiler, all the commands. So that's great. The compiler is now installed. Let's set up a small project kind of thing so that we can work with TypeScript. So I'm just going to create an index.html. And also, if you don't want to use the HTML way, you can go ahead and use the Node way. Just run the JavaScript file, which our TypeScript compiler is going to give after compiling the TypeScript. But I'm just going to do it the HTML way for now. So I have got my boilerplate in here. And let's go TypeScript tutorial. Okay. So now we're not going to have much in here. So yes, TypeScript. The main thing that we're going to do is to use the developer tool so that we can use the console and see all the output that we're going to be getting by running these things. So the first thing is, of course, to create our TypeScript file. So I'm going to create it inside an src folder. So src/script.ts, hit enter, and you can see that there's a TypeScript file. So TypeScript uses the TS as the extension, And what we're going to be doing is to compile this TypeScript into JavaScript, as I told in the beginning. So we'll be creating a new folder. It will be created automatically, called dist or distribution, and it will have the script.ts file inside that, and that is what we'll be linking. So if you want to compile a TypeScript, there are a few things that we'll need. The main thing is that we'll need to have a configuration file so that TypeScript can understand and you can change various options of the compiler. So for creating a configuration file, what you need to run is to run the command tsc, which is the TypeScript compiler again, --init or initialize. That's what --init is. I can see that there's a new file here called tsconfig.json. So if you open that up, you'll see that there's a lot of comments in here. So these are just a few options that you can change. So if you scroll down, you'll see different options. You can see this is the JavaScript version that this TypeScript is going to be compiled into. You can change that. I'll just show you an example later, like why you should change it. Then you have some directories, the root dirs. So I'm going to change the root dir in here, and that's our src folder, which means all our TypeScript code is going to be in the src folder. You can name it whatever you want, doesn't matter. And I'm also going to find the out dir, and that's where the JavaScript is going to go on to. So we're going to put this in a dist slash script.js file. So we'll need to change the directory to dist. So now if you want to compile our code, you can just run tsc. Nothing might happen because there's nothing actually in this file, but you can see that there's a script.js with just use strict, this using the strict mode in JavaScript. So you can add some JavaScript code also in here, since I told that TypeScript is valid, like JavaScript is just valid TypeScript. So you can go and give const JS code, just naming it something, equals hello. Okay, this just looks like JavaScript. So if you run it again, you will see that if you look in this file again, you have the same thing here, but you're using var in here. That's because you're using an older version of JavaScript. If you look inside our file in here, I'll just close that out. You will see at the top that we are using the ES5 version, which is a bit old. So we can use ES6, which provides some more features, so the JavaScript part will look more better. But if you use an older version, it will be compatible with the older browsers, which doesn't actually matter right now because we're just using TypeScript, and it just doesn't matter because we're not going to look the compatibility or anything. It's just for the TypeScript tutorial, right? So I'm just gonna go with the default ES6. I'm just gonna change it to ES6, not with the default ES5. So I'm gonna close that. Now let's have a look at the main types in TypeScript. So TypeScript by default has a few types, just like JavaScript. If you look into that, you'll see that if you hover over this, you'll see string. That says that this variable called JS code is a string. So if you return here, you can give a type explicitly. It means const JS code, the same name, equals hello. Now you'll see that this is by default. Okay, you don't look at this error which comes. That's because we have the same name in here also. It doesn't actually matter. So you can see by default it's a string because it has quotes around the value. Now you can make it a string. You can tell the TypeScript that this is a string if you want by putting a colon and giving in string. So you can see that now it's a string. So that's great. We have told TypeScript that this is a string right now. There are a few default types, the ready-made types. So there's string, there's number, there's boolean, then there are much more. There are arrays and stuff. We'll cover them soon. So this is a string. Then you have const number, let's name it age, that's better, equals 13. So this is a number. If you hover over this, you will see that the value is 13 and it's of a type number. But if you want to tell TypeScript that it's a number type, put a colon and give in the type number. Okay, and you can maybe give a boolean also, const nose to code equals true. So this is a boolean, so true false values are booleans, and if you hover over this, you will see that it's true. And again, you can tell the compiler about this by putting a colon and giving in the type, so which is boolean in this case. So you can see if you hover over this now, this is a boolean. We're just telling TypeScript compiler, it doesn't actually matter if you don't give this. TypeScript will understand by default by the value which you give on the right. But if you're gonna do like let my var If you do this, it may not like it because there's no value for this. It's given as any, and any is not very good. You have to give some kind of type for any variable that you create. So you can make this as a number, for example, number, and then you can just go down and tell my var equals to maybe 14. So you can see this is a number now. We can change it. But what if we change this to a string? Let's try that out. Let's make it a string 14. If you hover over this now, you get an error that type string is not assignable to type number. That's because we told TypeScript that this myVar variable is a number and not a string. But we are changing it down to a number here, which is not possible. That's one great feature of TypeScript. You might not find it much useful now, but when you build more projects, you'll understand the use of this awesome TypeScript type system that it provides. So you can see that that's a problem. It's a number and we can't assign a string value to it. So let's just turn it back into a number and the error should just disappear. You can see it just goes. So now let's open up a browser and do some more stuff, the main features of TypeScript. So now one thing is that whenever we finish writing our code, we'll again and again have to run tsc. It's only then that it's going to compile our TypeScript, right? So you can see here it got compiled, but it's not good to always do the same thing again and again. So what we can do is to run the watch command. So you can open up your terminal and do tsc --watch, and what this will do is to start looking for changes. For example, if you remove the semicolon and add a semicolon here or something, you'll see it'll start recompiling and it'll make the changes again. So it'll just go over the compilation process again and again, so we don't actually have to do any of those. So now one thing is that we can't see our output, right? So what I did is I created an index.html file in here, we did in the beginning, and I right clicked on it and opened with live server. Now if you don't have that option, you'll need to install the live server extension for VS Code. You can search for live server and you'll see this is the one. It has a lot of downloads, 14 million downloads. So that's what you'll have to install. And once you've got that installed, you can right click in here and select open with live server. I've already got it open in here, as you can see. And now we're going to link up our script, and we're not going to the TypeScript script because, as I told, the browser won't understand TypeScript. So you're going to link up this script, which is again and again being compiled by our TypeScript compiler process that's running in here. So you'll know how to link a script tag, right? So you can do a script, and it's going to have a source of dist/script.js. So now we can just go ahead and have a look if this is working, like if the script got connected to our HTML file. So you can just do a log, and you can log the myVar variable, which is a number. So if you return here and open up the developer tools by right clicking and inspecting, and if you go to the console, you can see that we got 14 in here, and that is because our variable is 14. And again, since we were compiling it again and again, you can see that it got changed in here. And it may not look as beautiful as you write it in here because, you know, there's no line spacing or anything, the lines go. But that's not even a problem because it's just the JavaScript. The TypeScript is our code and JavaScript is just getting compiled. So that is about the connection part. So we have everything linked up now. So we can have a look at the different features of TypeScript. So since we had a look at the 4 main types, okay, I'll just keep it over there actually. I'll just comment those stuff out. Now let's have a look at how we can create arrays with TypeScript. So for example, you want an array of 5 numbers. What you would do is to write const my arr equals, and in a bracket you would put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So if you hover over this, you can see it's an array of numbers. Here it actually tells us the type. VS Code is intelligent enough to tell us that. And also, if you didn't know, fun fact, VS Code is also built with TypeScript. So if you don't want this to happen automatically, you can also go here and give the type in here, so number and that. So it just makes this an array of numbers. Okay, that's very simple, nothing great. And if you want an array of strings, you could do my const my strarr, my string array, equals hello and hi. I don't know why I kept those things in there, but still. And you can make this a string of arrays by telling that it's an array, and it's a string of, like, it's an array of strings actually, not a string of arrays. So you can see that it's working perfectly fine, and if I want, I can just log my ARR. If I return here, you'll see I have all these numbers. I can also log my strarr, and it's okay. You can see it came hello and hi. And yeah, that's some great things. And you can of course push stuff onto this array. So my ARR dot, okay, my not str, my ARR dot push. And since this is an array of numbers, we can only push numbers in there. For example, if you push 6, return in here, and make this to my ARR, then we will get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because we added it in here. But if we were to give in, for example, some string in there instead of a number, because this is an array of numbers, right? If you look in the compiler now, you'll see that there's this error here. Also, VS Code tells us that it's not assignable. The error which we got before, we can't change the types of all these kind of things because we have told the compiler that this is a number array and this is an array of strings. So you can only push numbers in there. So that's that. The next thing that we're going to have a look at is unions. So I'll just give a heading in here. Actually, that will make it much better. So arrays, and now we're going to go for unions. You know what? Just uncomment those. You don't actually have to comment those things. Okay. So unions are like options. So it can either be this or this. You can do that very simple way here. For example, you want to have a const my favorite language equals, and there are different ways to do this, but we have to create a type. That's the main thing. So for creating a type, you can do the type keyword. This is how you create a custom type in TypeScript, and you give the name, for example, lang, my favorite lang, whatever you want to call it, and you give the different values that it can take. So a union can take multiple values, but it has only one value, but it can be from among a set of values. So for example, I have JS, it can be otherwise, it can be Python, it can be else, it can be Go, like I can just give a set of languages. And in here, you can give a type for this variable by giving a colon, making it a lang. And in here, you can, if you give in quotes, you'll find all the options that are available. So this can be either a JavaScript, or Python, or Go, because this type of lang has only these options. So if you do control space by having quotes in there, you can see that our IDE is intelligent enough to give all these options. Click on JS, and you can see there's no error in here. If you don't give that, you can see a string is not assignable to type lang because this is an empty string, and lang should be any of these. It can be a JavaScript, Python, or Go. So that's about unions. Unions are just types that can take multiple values, like one from among multiple values. I'll also show you another example, maybe with numbers. So I'll just make a JS and type favorite number equals 0 or 1 or 2 or 3. Just go on like that, and you could create a variable of this type by giving const my favnum, my favorite number, and make it of the type favnum. And it's gonna be, if you go like that, if you do control space, you'll get the options. So it can be any of these values, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, or 3. If you added 4 here, it can be even that. So it can give 4 in here, it's valid. And if you give 5 in here, it won't be valid because this type can accept only 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that's how you can work with these. And of course, you can log those things out. So you can just log my favnum, return here. I'll just reload. You can see we get 4. And also these logs are just logging up these stuff. So I'm just going to comment that log over there. So that's how unions work. Now let's have a look at another topic called tuples, whatever we pronounce it as, Tuples. So this is like an array which has different types of types. So you can have one string, one number, one boolean, different things like that. So first, let's create our type for this. You may not understand this, but I'm just gonna show you how it works. So type person, maybe you can give something like person attr, person attributes, equals, and it's a tuple of string. So first we'll have the name of the person, then we'll have number, the age of the person, and then it'll have the if the person knows to code or not. So true, I mean boolean. So I'll just give a small comment there. Name, age, knows to code. Okay, so now we can create like a tuple out of this type. So you can create const my tuple equals, and of course you have to give the type. So person attr equals, and you're gonna make this an array, and it's gonna have 3 different values of 3 different types. So the first thing is the name, so Naseel. So you're gonna give the age, and then you're gonna give if the person knows to code or not. For me, it's true. So you'll see there's no errors, it works perfectly. So for example, if you don't want the last one, you just remove that and remove that also. And if you're wondering if you should always create this type in here, no, you don't have to. You can just cut that out and paste it in here. And you can remove that, and you'll see it's still valid. All you need to do is to give this colon and give the type. So we before made a type, and you like the type keyword, and you gave the type, but you can also give it like this directly. It'll just work perfectly fine. But for example, if you're going to create another one, so const my second tuple and you have to again give all these things again. So you have to just do that, but that's not convenient. That's why I created the type. Of course you can use this thing if there's only one to do, but I'm just gonna go with this code. So that is tuples. But also you can log these things, so you can just do a console.log, and you can log in my tuple, and if you return back to your browser, you'll see it works. So this is just an array with different kinds of values, because you cannot create like a normal array like this in TypeScript, because all the values needs to be of the same type. You can create a tuple instead. Next, let's have a look at enums, which is again another topic of TypeScript, enum. So enums are kind of like objects. They're very similar to objects, but they have a bit of differences. So to create an enum, you're going to use the enum keyword, and then after that you're going to give the name for the enum. For example, my dir, direction maybe, and then you can create an object out of that. Okay, you actually don't need an equal sign. Okay, so to do this, you can have multiple values inside this. Maybe I want top, center, and I can also have one like bottom. Yeah, so now I can just log out the my dir dot and have all these values. So I have bottom, center, and top. So let's log out top, go back to our browser, and we get a 0. And I'll just comment out this tuple log so that it won't get confusing in there. So if we just get a 0 in there, that's because this is going to be valued based on the order. So this is going to be 0 by default, this is going to be 1, and this, the bottom, is going to be 2. So if you add another one called left, then you'll have the value of 3 for it. So depending on how you order this, it's going to have separate values, but that's not what we want. We want the top to be a string of top. So you can give top, then everything else will break, so you just need to even give names for that. Center, and this is going to be bottom. Okay, so these are the names for the different directions. Of course, they're not directions, I just made it up. So you can see that we get top right now. You can just remove that. Press Control space, I get my autocomplete. I have central, so if we go back, and you can see we get center, and that's because we're logging that out in here. So that's enums. Now let's have a look at objects. It's just the same as JavaScript objects, but you'll need to create an interface. I'm going to tell you what interfaces are, but let's start with objects. So to create an object, just like usual in JavaScript, so const me equals that. It's going to have a name. It's going to be a string. I mean, like a value actually. Naseel. We're going to have an age of 13. Languages, like all the programming languages that I know. Give HTML. So much people ask if HTML is a language or not. I'm just going to include it in here, okay? You can have CSS, you could have JavaScript, you could have Go, you could have more in here, but it's just gonna go on. And don't worry about that, it'll just go, okay? So now the thing is that if you hover over this is the type. Like, it might seem a bit kind of funny, but this is the type, and this is what is called an interface. So we can create an interface in here. What we can do is go here and create a new interface. So I can just rename this to objects and interfaces, because that's also one thing that we're going to have a look at right now. So to create an interface, okay, type an interface, give a name for the interface, so person, and you can go like that. This is almost the same as a type, so you can just give a type also instead of this. I'll just comment this out and show you the type way. You can do a type person equals like that, and you could just continue with whatever I write inside this. It's going to be the same, but I'm just going to use the interfaces right now. The syntax just becomes a bit different if you use types. So for this, you're going to have a name. It's going to be a string. I'm just going to sketch out whatever we have in this here. Then you have a semicolon. You have the age, which is a number. So it's just the types of everything we have in here, okay? So the name is a string, the age is a number, and this length is an array of strings. So length string, and it's an array of strings. Now we can apply the type in here. If you go and person, see, no errors, everything is working just fine. And I can of course go ahead and log out the person, me. So if I return to my browser, you'll see that I have this, so I can see everything, my name, all the values are there. So that's working fine. For example, if you want to have some optional values, like it's not like required that I need to have a length right now, because if I remove this length in here, you get an error because length is missing. So the languages attribute is missing in here, as you can see. So if you want to make something optional, instead of giving a colon, you can give a question mark colon. So if it's there, have it. If it's not, don't have it. Return here, everything is working fine. Everything is going good. So that is interfaces and objects. Of course, there are more things you can do with it, but that's the basics. Now let's have a look at assertion or type assertion. It's like you're treating a value of a variable as of another type. For example, if you have a variable of the type any, then you want to treat it as a number, you can use type assertion. So for doing that, for example, you have my age equals 13, and this is an any type. So some frameworks may not provide TypeScript, so everything will be treated as any. And if you want to, for example, make this a number, you would do const my num age. To make it of a type number, you would do my age, and you give as number. This will convert this into a number. If you hover over this, you will see that it's a number. This is still any, but this is a number. If I was to log out my num age and return, you'll see I get 13. That's because even if you log out this, it gives the same thing. But it's just like, for example, if a function needs an argument as a number and you don't have the value of some other object as a number, you can use this syntax as number, converting it, like asserting it into a number and doing that. There's also another way to do this, a different syntax. You could do here, you could do number. This looks a bit more fancy, depends on your choice, whatever you want to use. This does the same thing as this. If you return back, you can see still we get the same output. So for now, I'm just gonna copy that down, and I'm just gonna number. just as a comment in case you want to refer it later. I'll put this onto GitHub, so you can just, all this code will be available on GitHub, okay? I'll have a link to this in the repository in the description. So if you get stuck while copying anything, you can just go ahead and have a look over there. So yeah, that is about type assertion. Now let's have a look at functions. Again, it's almost same as JavaScript functions, but we're again adding types. There are a lot of extra features of TypeScript, as I told. So now let's go with functions. So to create a function, you can use the arrow function syntax, or you can use the normal function keyword. So for now, I'm just going to use the normal function keyword. I want to get the product of two numbers. Just an example. So product is just multiplies two numbers and gives me back the result. So function product, like that. If you don't have any, now we will be taking two arguments, but if you hover over this right now, it doesn't take any arguments and gives a return type of void. Void means it's not returning anything. So for example, if you're returning 1, if you hover over this now, you can see it gives 1 in here, a number in here, because we are returning 1. If it was a string, like hello, if you hover in here, you can see it's returning a string. So you can explicitly say that it returns a string. And now if you give a number in here, it'll become an error because we can only return a string in this. So for doing this function, you'll need to take num1 and num2, and I'll just change the number. We're going to return a number, and we're going to return num1 multiplied by num2. Very simple. Now if you hover over this, you can see it's of any type. Now it's very, very bad to give any type to anything you create. So unless you don't have the time or you don't want to do it, you can give the any type, but it's not a good choice. So you can just make this a number and even this a number. So what happens now is that TypeScript understands that these two num1 and num2 properties are numbers. So it's sure that it will be returning a number in here. So if you hover over this now, you can see it takes in num1 and num2, which are all numbers, and returns a number. So let's try it out right now. We can do a log of the product of, we can take 1 and 2, 1 and 3 maybe. So you can see that you get 3 in here, and that's because 1 multiplied by 3 is of course 3. If I make this 4 and return here and reload, you can see I get 4 here. If I make this 2, you get 8, because yeah, 2 multiplied by 4 is 8. And if I want, I could create an error also. For example, I could give a string in here. You'll get an error if you hover over this. Argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type number. That's because in here we're taking a number, and in here we are giving a string, which is not great. And all these errors are visible via the TypeScript compiler also. So in case you want to view it there, you can see it there. So I'll just remove those codes and we're good to go. So that's working. You can also use arrow functions. For example, I can just convert this to an arrow function, const product equals, and you can go in here, do that. It'll still work the same way. You can return here and still get the same output. Totally fine, it works. So we can also implement interfaces on functions, so we can avoid all these. No, we can't actually avoid, but we can tell that this is an interface. Taken from this interface is this function. So you can create a new interface, and I'm just going to name it product int, and it's an interface. And what this is going to do is to take in a number 1, a num2, and it's gonna return a number. And we're again gonna give types in here. So number 1 is gonna be a number, so is number 2. And now we can apply the interface just like we did with the others, the object above. If you go back, you can see we apply the interface in here just like that. For this function also, you can give the product int or interface. I'll just close that out. Yeah, so now if you return, you can see it works perfectly fine. Everything is fine, and we have applied this interface onto this. So that's a small tip and small thing that you could do with that, interfaces and functions. Now let's have a look at classes. Now classes is a feature that's there in JavaScript itself, but I'm just going to explain it. It was introduced in JavaScript ES6, I believe. So if you look at our TypeScript compiler configuration, we are compiling to ES6, so we should get the class even if we are like compiling to ES5, but it won't have the class keyword and some things might be different. So for that, let's give it our heading class. So class is just like an object. You can create multiple objects of like a class. You can instantiate. So it's class like a blueprint where you can create multiple like types of blueprints, or it's like, I'll just show it to you if you don't know. And it's not much different from JavaScript classes, just a few differences here and there. So creating a class, use the class keyword, user. So this is a user class, and you can have multiple IDs, like not IDs, multiple properties in here and multiple methods. Properties are just variables and methods are just functions, but when we use them inside a class, they have different names. So variables are called properties, and these things like these functions are called methods. So let's create one property, maybe a UID, a user ID. It's going to be a string. Then we are going to have a name of string, and then we have multiple fields in here. For now, I'm just going to skip all those, and let's create a constructor function. So constructor, this is just a function, and this is one of the main functions when you're creating a class. This is a function that gets called every time like you create a new object from this class. So for example, if I log new user, and I'll create a new user now. Oops. So const Naseel equals new user, and you can see that. If I go back here, you can see that I'm getting logged new user. That's because this constructor function is running. If I log it a lot of times, you can see it gets run a lot of times. And if I copy this down to Naseel 2 or something, and you'll double it, you'll see there's a lot. So that's how it goes. So now what you can do is in this constructor function give some values, some props you can tell, like if you're using React. So you have UID and name. Oops, all caps, name and UID, and these are going to be strings. So some TypeScript stuff. Oh, again caps lock, string, string, and this is going to be UID. And it's also going to be a string. And now what we can do is to set this name. So this name is different from this name. This is the parameter of the constructor function, and this is the property. So to set this property, you're going to do this, and it's confusing. There are a lot of this is in here, but this dot name will return this property. Okay, and you can give this dot name equals name, the name which we get from here. And now if you hover over this, you can see that we get an error. Expected 2 arguments but got 1. That's because we are searching for a UID, and also we are searching for a name. So you can do a UID of maybe some unique stuff, and you can create a name. So Naseel, we can give a this dot UID equals UID, and you can also maybe log this dot name and also this dot UID. So you can get to know all these things should pass in the function. You can see we get Naseel and the ID, the something that we pass in here. So that's working. We create the constructor function and everything is going good. Of course, you can create more methods in here. Maybe you want register, and you can also create a login. So maybe for this register function, you want to just log user created, and now we can just new user, and we can just register and do that. And if we return here, you'll see the thing which we are doing, the constructor function once every single time. And then this also, let's create a login function simply. So you just log in JWT colon and something, just a JSON web token, just for fun, just for showing you. And so afterwards you can just do a Naseel dot login. Oops. Oh man. Login. Okay, that's not working, but the thing is that you can just go here and do a login. And now if you return here, you can get JWT colon blah blah blah. That's because we passed the same thing in there, and that seems to be working perfectly fine. So that's how you create classes, and you can manipulate them and do some stuff with it. Now there's some more things called access modifiers. So you can make these properties three things. You can make it public, private, or protected. Now by default these are public, so you can just give public in here if you want to, because if you don't give also, it's public. You can make it private, which means if you try to get the UID, which is private here, right down here, so you can just log maybe Naseel dot, and you can see that UID is not shown here. So if I do a UID, I return here, it's not getting compiled because our TypeScript has got some errors, and that's because this UID is private. So if this is private, we won't be able to access it from outside this class. So inside this we can access it. So inside this full block of code, we'll be able to access this UID by using this .uid, but from outside that we won't be able to access it. Now other than private, it's also protected, which means that it can be accessible by this class and the class that extends this class. It might be a bit confusing, but you can extend classes, so you can have a class, a copy of this with more features. So that's also possible, but if you do that, you can access this if you use protected. But for now, I'm just going to make it private. And here you can see that it won't compile, so it will just log in. If I just log in Naseel, you can see I get everything. I can see the UID, everything is working fine. So that's how you can use classes with TypeScript. It's very similar to JavaScript, but there are also some more changes. That's it. Now, like how we did before with functions, we can even implement interfaces with classes. So if you scroll down, I'll create a new interface. So interface user int, or you can call it user type, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be interface. And this is going to have a UID, which is a string. It's going to have a name, which is a string. And then you're going to have register, which is a function. So register, and it's going to be a void because you're not returning anything. And then we're also going to have a login function. So login void. Okay, now in case you wanted to return something here, maybe you want to return the JWT something, you would just change this from void to string. And again, it depends on what you're returning, but for now it's like this. And for implementing the the interface onto this class, you're going to use the implements keyword, implements, and the user interface. There you go. So now what's that error? UID is blah blah blah. So let's see what. Okay, that's because it's private. Delete that. So it works now. So what the thing is that we are just creating this interface and applying it onto this class. So the UID is the same as UID. The name register is a function which returns nothing. You can see same thing here. And the login also is a function which returns nothing, so it's a void. So if I want to return a string, it gets an error here, but instead we can just return a string, and now it works perfectly fine. So that's how you can implement interfaces with classes. Now I just wanted to show you an example on using TypeScript with React. So that's the main things about TypeScript. So we learned all this stuff today. It might be a bit like confusing if it's the first time you're trying TypeScript, but yeah, we learned all these things. Let's close out all those and let's create a new React app, and I'm just going to show you how TypeScript works in React. So I'll just quit out of that, Control C, clear the screen, and let's create a React app. So whenever we create a React app, we usually use create React app. So that's what we're going to do this time also. npx create -react -app, and I'm just going to make it React and TS TypeScript. And now for using TypeScript, we just can't run this command. We have to provide an additional flag called template. So we're going to give -- template equals TypeScript. You don't have to give the equals in there, so just get rid of that. So this is go ahead and use the TypeScript template for the create React app utility, and let's go. Again, this might take a few seconds to run. Depends on internet speed, the computer speed, all the stuff. So I will be back once that's done. So the React app got created. I just cleaned up some files that you usually do. And one thing that you might have realized is that we are having this .tsx extension instead of .js. So when you use TypeScript, we have with React, okay, we have the .tsx extension, and if you're just using plain TypeScript, you just have .ts. And some files will have the .d.ts. That's when you have all these types, the references, and you can also like export some types and interfaces from those files. So I just cleaned up this file in here, nothing in there, nothing crazy. If you go back, it's nothing is there. Type in hello, return here. You can see that we get hello there. So let's just create a simple component, title.tsx is what I'm gonna call it. And this is just like a normal React component which just displays some title, and we can change the color. So I'm just going to use the snippet extension. If you don't have it, you can just go here and search for ES7 React Redux GraphQL React native snippets. So very super useful extension if you want to download that out. So when you get the snippet, that's how. So now we usually when you use React, we use the prop types with JavaScript, so you can do title.prop types, that like prop types, there's some stuff. But when you're using TypeScript, we again use interfaces. We had to look at interfaces when we dealt with the objects, so now we're going to create a new interface called props. So when we want to get props in React while using TypeScript, we'll need to use interfaces. So you can create interface. It's going to have a title and a color, and this is going to be from the props. And in here we can have title, string, and color, which is a string. Cool. So now there are no errors, nothing, everything's working fine. I'm just going to make the color optional because we're going to have a fallback in here. So paragraph, and we're going to display a title in here. Simple. And in this paragraph, I'm going to give a style equals color to be, so we're checking if the color is there. So if there's color, then I want the color to be, maybe go for let's go for color, and if there's no color, let's go for green. So if the color is not there, so if the user did not pass in a color, it's going to be green color by default. Now we'll need to display it. So for doing that, we can import the component, import title, and after that we can display the title in here. And you might find this error because this title prop is missing. You just go here and you can see we are looking for a title prop which is not optional. So you can pass in title equals hello. If you return here, you can get hello in there, and if you zoom in properly, you'll see that it's green color. And we can again give a color equals red maybe, and according to logic here, it should turn to red, which it does. So that's how you can use React with TypeScript. So that was it for this video. I just wanted to show you TypeScript. So we covered the basics, some advanced concepts like interfaces. It's not so advanced, but yeah. And also we had a look at using it with React. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you liked the video, and if you did, like the video, give a thumbs up, and comment down below on what videos I should do next, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.